Being someone who's been aware of anime since the early 2000s, Fullmetal Alchemist was always within the zeitgeist I was exposed to. It was always on my radar. Peers of mine would speak of it quite often, and it was recommended to me on multiple occasions. I was vaguely aware of what the show consisted of. Two brothers, one being just a suit of armor, and their ability to use alchemy. I knew nothing else. I didn't know the actual plot, their goal, the world, any of the other characters. I had no idea what I was in for. Fullmetal Alchemist is a series that knows exactly what kind of feelings it's aiming to bestow upon the viewer. Many would call this a roller coaster of emotions. I definitely agree with this. It has this ability to manage our emotions with such precision. Let us begin by first establishing the world within which we find ourselves. Amestris, a strangely circular country given their recent annexation of Ishval. Given its location, it possesses a wide breadth of geography, from the snowy fields and mountains of Briggs in the north, to the hot, dusty Rush Valley and Ishval of the south, to the grassy, rolling hills of Rezembul. I had noticed, as I'm sure many of you initially did as well, that the country was oddly circular. In addition to that, Central City, too, was circular. Given the basic nature of alchemy requiring a circle, immediately this was suspect to me. However, I still had no idea what its purpose was for, until we saw what happened to Xerxes. Xerxes, a kingdom now in ruins, situated in the desert between Amestris and Xing. Tales speak of the first alchemist traveling from here to teach Amestris and Xing of alchemy. Both spoke of the same blonde-haired man. Little did I know who this really was. Father, with the body of Hohenheim, traversed the desert and founded the nation of Amestris. Meanwhile, Hohenheim was discovered by the people of Xing and taken in by them so that he may be spared by the desert. Xing, a country with forces who I did not expect to serve such a large role in this story. A country fabled to be similar to that of China in our world. A country of such diversity similar to Amestris. They practiced Eastern alchemy, or alchemy, which basically used the ley lines of the world to use alchemy in a more passive way. Admittedly, being the geography nerd I am, I wish we could have seen it for ourselves. Lastly, Drachma. While there are the two other nations spoken of, Iergo and Creta, Drachma was given a bit of spotlight during the Briggs arc. A cold, hard land, mostly of snow and tundra. The only bit we saw of it was the Drachman forces being lured by Kimberly to attack Briggs. I too wish we got to know more about this land. Regardless, I understand they were not the focus of this story. The main focus of this story was the characters. Fullmetal Alchemist has a very unique approach to handling its characters, in my experience. I learned very quickly that every single character counts. From the Chimera that betrayed Kimberly, to Beto from Doubleth, to Ross and Brosh, Hughes, Havoc, Falman, Breda, Prairie, Olivier's men, the Buccaneer, Greed's friends, Old Man Fu, Nina, Rose, the very people of Amestris and Xing. Everyone serves a role, but in order to begin to address any of them, I will first need to start with the one who started it all. Edward Elric. He and his brother have souls of a purity so pristine. They are no strangers to suffering. From the first episode I met him, I knew this was going to be a tragic character, but one who could see through his tragedy were he to keep moving forward. Alas, it would take more than just him alone. Edward depended on his brother, his friends, his father, everybody. He knew that, and he embraced it. Ed is a very stubborn kid, very set in his beliefs, at least at first. Very quickly, we see him become humbled by his seemingly evident ineptitude. Even so, it was more than that. Alchemy wasn't the solution to all of his problems, and he needed to understand that. He had the ability to decipher any puzzle, to study any subject and grasp it completely. This was why, through studying alone, he could not learn what he needed to learn. Alchemy wasn't it. Through the loss of his mother Trisha and the abandonment of their father Hohenheim, Ed had no choice but to try his best with what he knew at the time. I find the contrast between episodes 3 and 63 to be very compelling. Ed used to speak very highly of alchemy. He believed it enabled him to do whatever he pleased. In a way, I'm sure he was convinced of this because without it, he wouldn't be able to hold on to the faint chance he could bring his mother back. But quickly, we learned that this could never happen. Her soul was gone. Without it, she could never return. From that point on, it became all about getting his brother's body back. Alphonse Elric. An absolute man, if you ask me. This boy is such a well of wisdom, he is to be protected at all costs. Alphonse got the worst end of things. He lost his entire body and could no longer experience the basic pleasures of everyday life. No more could he taste food, experience hunger, nor the satisfaction of fulfilling it. No longer could he feel warmth or cold. No longer could he feel even the rain falling on his face. Even sleep evaded him. Yet, this never crushed his spirit. He maintained an optimism I'm sure most could only dream of. On top of that, he believed in his brother with all of his heart. Al already possessed an intuition in him that Ed could only dream of emulating. So the story for him was less one of personal growth and more one of mentorship. So many times through the story have we seen Al be the guiding light for others. And naturally, he was far more receptive to his father than Ed was. Van Hohenheim. He is my favorite character of the series, hands down. And apparently, I look like him, so that's a plus to me. At first, given how the show presented him, I was very unsure about him. It was a smart approach when you think about it. For half the show, we only understood Hohenheim through the lens of his sons. They felt abandoned by him, and their last memory of him was his seemingly cold stare at them before he left without saying a word. This was necessary so that we could be on the same level as them. But thankfully, the show gradually revealed him to us and slowly solidified who he really was. I liked how his relationship to father was left up in the air for so long. I was so certain he was father at first, given his absence and such. However, it turns out his origin is far more satisfying than that, though at the same time far more tragic. Hohenheim is a soft-hearted man who had to bear the literal weight of hundreds of thousands of souls upon his being. He was fundamentally manipulated, yet bared the guilt all the same. In the hundreds of years that came after the tragedy in Xerxes, he did his best to make up for it. He did his best to make amends for the chaos father had caused. Regardless, Hohenheim left his sons because he was doing what he had to do. He knew they were best left in the hands of Trisha and the Rockbells. Winry Rockbell, an absolutely empathetic person with an infectious interest in automail. I enjoy how she's very mechanically inclined, and how we get to see her flourish in Rush Valley. I remember at first being excited that she was tagging along with the Elrics, and then quickly realized how much I wanted her to stay away from the danger. While she is a very emotionally supportive person, and is effectively the healer of the party, she is not someone meant to be in the role of combat. Just like Ed had told her after she faced Scar, her hands were those of healing, of creation. They were not hands that killed, that destroyed. Another thing as well, I enjoy how organic her relationship with Ed is. Not once did it feel overbearing or unnatural. When she finally realized she was in love with him, it felt just right. And to keep with the tone of the show, it wasn't shoved in front and center afterwards. Winry managed to move on after her confrontation with Scar, and it was such a pleasure to see them speak after that. Scar. The first time he was introduced, he appeared to be quite cold. Though I understood that he had good intentions behind his actions, this show has such a way of shining perspective on its characters so that you can finally understand them and where they come from. Scar experienced the worst of the worst. A hostile force took over his home, killing his friends and family in front of him. He woke up with his brother's arm attached to him, and he went ballistic, unfortunately killing the Rockbells as a result. This story is one of atonement for him. While he abandoned the name that was given to him by God, his actions still showed that he sought redemption above all else. Seeing him go from hating a mistress and its alchemists to fighting alongside them has to be one of the most satisfying arcs for me in fiction. His relationship with Marco especially was touching to me. When he first met Marco, he held him against a wall and was about to kill him. He even completely ruined his face. But then, by the end, they were willingly traveling together and working together. I thought that was amazing to see, and very symbolic of Scar's growth. Admittedly, this is the first part of the video where I can't tie in one section to the next. We will be talking about our favorite housewife alchemist, Izumi Curtis. When she was first introduced into the show through the Elric brothers' mention of her, she indeed sounded like a demon. I mean, if you upset her, then yes, a demon does awaken. However, we learn that it is not without reason. Izumi is someone who looks at the Elric brothers as if they are her own sons. She is unable to have her own, after all. Izumi's relationship with the Elrics, and specifically Ed, is very touching to me. She is very open and honest with them, and only wishes to help them. Her relationship with her husband Sieg is also very fun to witness. They are a cute couple, again also very organic and believable. She prides herself on her status as a housewife that can whoop ass, and I'm there for it. I actually enjoyed her OVA very much. She played a key role in the Elric's understanding of the world and alchemy, but as well, another group of characters played a huge role in helping the Elrics. The leader of this group being Roy Mustang. A man with an eye for the future, a soft leader, even if it's to his detriment. His relationship with Hughes in particular was a blast to witness. I remember how conflicted and disgusted I felt when he had apparently killed Ross out of vengeance. He's a man who gets serious when he needs to, but is never too serious. Except that one time. One of my fondest memories of him was him plugging his nose and speaking over the radio, busting a gut over how fun it was. Without his two closest allies, Riza and Hughes, though, he wouldn't have stood a chance. He believed in the good in others, although this sometimes did not turn out well. Riza Hawkeye. Someone who doesn't use alchemy, nor need to anyway. She was one of the humans that could face the homunculi head-on, and without a lack of courage. She is a very loyal person and a reliable friend. I remember being incredibly concerned when she was drafted by Bradley to stand by his side at all times, as well when Pride confronted her and we saw him as Selim for the first time. Riza actually served as a kind of glue between events in the story. She actually held a very fundamental role to it all. Maze Hughes. A man with a love for his family unmatched by anyone else for their own. Though especially with memories of their past and the wartime OVA, we learn that this is a face he puts on for others. Hughes is a strong man, one who can hold on to his paradoxical actions and understand the necessity of them. He knows he took away the lives of others. He knows he's a hypocrite for doing it just to protect his own family. But at the same time, it's simply what he had to do. Despite everything he went through, he was able to suppress the eyes of a murderer and look at his wife and daughter with the same softness he always had. Was this healthy? Not really. But was it necessary? For the sake of his family, I think so. I'm glad Hughes got to impart some of his understanding onto Winry. Their conversation was very touching to witness. It really showed us how he truly is underneath his bombastic appearance. With that, I'd like to shift focus onto the gang from Xing, starting with Ling Yao. Ling is a lovable goofball, with a love for his people unmatched by any other ruler. The contrast between him and Bradley is something else. Ling is someone who epitomizes the tenacity of humanity. Even when he was taken over by greed, he never succumbed to the Tempest. He maintained his consciousness and saw through it to the end because he knew he had to get back home and get back to Lanfan. Xing is very lucky to have a person like Ling. His loyalty to his people, his friends, and his family is the very ideal pinnacle of what represents a true leader. He is someone I know we can trust with the Philosopher's Stone. Lanfan. Lanfan's sacrifice at the beginning easily made her one of my favorite side characters. To see her with an automail was very satisfying, and only leaves me to wonder about the new possibility this adds to her arsenal as a bodyguard. She and Old Man Fu were also incredibly key to the whole story, and both against Wrath too, no less. My fondest moment with her, actually, was when she returned from Xing. Spectacular. Mei Cheng and Xiao Mei. A cute duo from Xing, but don't let their appearance fool you. Mei is more than capable of defending herself, but still, being young and naive, she can be easily swayed. Her adoration for the Elric brothers was also a fun part of the story. She actually taught us a lot about Eastern alchemy, which I really appreciated. Her insight was necessary towards understanding what Scar's brother uncovered, so her part should not be understated. Kimberly. This is a man of utter fascination of mine. Of course, when we first met him, I thought he was quite the freak, a psycho, and in a way he somewhat is. He is not afraid to take lives. However, he is someone who stands by his values and is never swayed from them. He respected the Rockbells for following through with their role as medics on the battlefield, and he respected Ed for following through with his conviction to never kill. In a way, I can definitely respect Kimberly in return, especially after his last interaction with Pride. Father, the dwarf in the flask. I have so many things to say, so many ideas and thoughts. Given his final interaction with truth, I believe Father was sent to experience eternal nothingness. Oblivion. The reason for this is quite simple. Father's wish was to experience everything, to see the whole world, the whole universe for all I know. Since this was his wish, truth must grant him his form of despair, nothingness. He is to not experience anything ever again. I think that explains why he clung to reality so hard and why he was so frightened when he was being taken into the abyss. Another thing I noticed in hindsight was how his gate of truth had nothing on it. It was blank. Initially, I believed this could be due to it potentially being your family tree, or a form of it. After all, we saw Pater Elric on Ed's gate. But then I realized, likely, the gate contains all of your knowledge of alchemy. Each person has a different gate after all, and the more you learn, likely, it changes. It seems Father never truly learned a thing. Instead, he clung to the idea of God, and simply bided his time on Earth until he could bring God down to him. He already had 500 years to experience the world with his new body, but instead, as far as I could see, he spent that whole time in Central, waiting and waiting. A complete waste of time and energy to me. Greed. While I will be speaking about the other homunculi in detail later, I would like to bring Greed forth front and center. Among all the homunculi, he has easily become one of my favorites. He has served the most fundamental role to the story. Greed had a misplaced sense of charity, the opposite of greed. He wished to be looked upon by those around him with reverence, respect, honor, awe, and love, even. He simply didn't understand how to receive such adoration until he witnessed Ed defeat Father in front of everyone. The conclusion to his story was the most satisfying of the homunculi. Lastly, for this section, we will be focusing on Olivier. Olivier became a prominent figure in the latter half of the series. I can appreciate her approach to reality, which is basically the approach of Briggs. Let the weak die and the strong succeed. As well, I can appreciate her acknowledgement of what Ed and the others can see. Those were eyes that did not want to see that pain again. She recognizes that, while they may not inherently be the ideal of strength that Briggs epitomizes, they possess a different strength, one that seeks to avoid conflict altogether. I enjoyed seeing her relationship with her brother Alex improve. Olivier is a well-intended person who can come off as very harsh and cold. 10 times more so than Izumi, in my opinion. But she is still an understanding human being. She simply has no patience for bullshit. Of course, amongst these characters, there were many relationships and dynamics between them all. This provided for some very fitting contrasts and character moments. What else would be more fitting than to start with the relationship that we focus on for the story? Ed and Al. Two brothers who went through numerous personal tragedies as mere children, from their father abandoning them, to their mother dying, to Ed losing half of his limbs and Al losing his whole body. A tragedy so present in their lives, they committed to burning it down so that they could hopefully move on. Initially, their journey was fueled by the wish to bring their mother back, but quickly they learned and accepted that this was not possible. But rather than fret on it, they understood the reality of the situation and allied their goals accordingly. Sure, they couldn't bring back their mother, but they could bring back their bodies. As a result of this origin, these two boys possess a bond unlike any other. They keep each other in check. In a way, I can relate to them, because I have a younger brother myself. The Elric brothers and their father, Hohenheim. This relationship was fascinating to see unfold, and it was as expected as well. Hohenheim led a complicated life, and unfortunately dragged them all into it. But as a result, they all got to live. Without those boys, Amestris may no longer exist. The most emotional moment for me was when Alex approached Hohenheim and thanked him for giving the world those kids. I could feel what Hohenheim felt. It was a pride like nothing else. He could wish for nothing more. Even Ed's relationship with his father was as expected. Ed is a stubborn guy, but still extends care to his father despite their past. The Elric brothers and their mentor, Izumi. I remember when we got to see her hug them. She's a character of great depth, and was just what the boys needed when they were growing up. I thoroughly enjoyed the episode when she left them on the island to learn how to survive on their own. It was a very philosophical episode, and key to understanding alchemy on a fundamental level. In fact, I think it definitely helps us understand truth more, and its place in the story. I will shine upon that later. Ed and Winry. An adorable pair, I must say. Their chemistry does not feel forced at all. It only feels natural to me, especially given their personalities. They're both awkward nerds with extreme capacities for passion in their interests. They also balance each other quite well. Winry is emotionally insightful, while Ed is stoic and calculative. Winry possesses a mechanical inclination, while Ed possesses an alchemical one. Ed, while being the cause of potential stress, teaches Winry how to maintain her emotions, while Winry teaches Ed how to be truthful to himself and others. Winry and Scar. After having learnt about what Scar did to Winry's parents, I couldn't help but speculate how their first encounter would be. Intense would be a word for it. Tragic would be another. Their story is one of acceptance, not necessarily one of forgiveness or even redemption. Winry had a choice to attempt to perpetuate the cycle of vengeance, but chose not to, with the aid of Ed. Scar, as well, could see himself in her in that moment, and understood who he was to her, an enemy having murdered her family. He was no different to Kimberly. Absolutely chilling to see his reaction afterwards, how taken off guard he was as he attempts to escape. Roy and Riza. I enjoyed the relationship very much. The relationship is one of mutual loyalty, respect, and love. Be it romantic or platonic, I enjoy how this was kept up to interpretation. In all honesty, to me, I prefer to see them in more of a platonic light. They are very close souls that look out for each other unconditionally. And that is a love that supersedes all else, if you ask me. Hohenheim and Father. Absolutely fascinating dynamic. Father, when he was in the flask, was oddly likable. I enjoyed the banter between him and Hohenheim. You can tell their beginnings were rather humble. But Father was manipulative, and from the very start, he used Hohenheim to get closer to God. I didn't point this out in my reaction, but I remember seeing Hohenheim stand there in Central at the very spot where Father was taken to the other side. I may be wrong, but Hohenheim appeared to feel sorry for Father. He gave birth to him, showed him that there's a world to be explored, only for Father would never have his dream fulfilled. It is pitiful, and I'm sure a weight on Hohenheim to an extent, given how empathetic he is. If anyone were to possess an inkling of understanding about who Father was, it would be Hohenheim. He does carry the name Father gave him, after all. Father gave him a life. Father and the Homunculi. After great reflection, I think I've come to understand the Homunculi and what they represent a bit more. As Truth said, did you think you'd be able to surpass humans if you let go of your 7 desires? Framing the sins as desires is very interesting, but this is Truth who is saying this. So really, it was Father who is framing his desires as sins. As we examine each homunculus, we will see more of what I'm talking about. Lust, to me, is embellishment. She represents the desire, the necessity even, to appear to be attractive. Of course, a small degree of this need is present in how we style ourselves, which one can argue is good. If we wished to not fit in at all, then that would only present a higher chance for society to neglect us. However, when this desire becomes too strong, it can become sinful. It can affect our behavior so that we behave with more promiscuity and less appropriately. It can affect our relationships and be the foundation of severely negative habits. Admittedly, I absolutely loved her character design. For reasons. Gluttony is the necessity for survival, the desire to live. This is provided through consumption. A reasonable amount is good, necessary even, to ensure that you survive. However, when you begin to consume for the pleasure of consuming and nothing more, it becomes gluttonous, sinful. You begin to eat not out of necessity, but out of the need for pleasure, just like lust with embellishment. Envy is the necessity for comparison, the desire to fit in, the desire to conform. However, when pushed to the extreme, envy becomes quite the beast. Envy becomes the force behind the need to destroy those you deem unworthy for possessing what you want. Despite the chaos that envy caused throughout the story, his passing was still sorrowful to witness for me. Sloth is the necessity for recreation, the desire for amusement. Without it, there would be no balance and we would burn out. Admittedly, Sloth is a bit more abstract to me. We didn't get to see nor know him for long. The only main negative force behind him, from what I can see, is the obvious fact that he holds himself back. Rather than put in the effort to realize his true potential, he does the bare minimum. His diligence, the opposite of sloth, is simply misplaced. Rather than focusing on the moment, he focuses on the fact his current work will quicken the end of such work. Pride is the necessity for motivation. Without pride, you would have no backing, no confidence behind any of your actions or reasons. But too much pride, and you can become blind to reality. Wrath is the necessity for patience. Without patience, you do not accept new ideas. With too much patience, nothing gets done. It is a bit loose and abstract, but one can see that the sins are really just desires brought to their extremes, desires that infringe upon others. It appears that Truth wished for Father to embrace these qualities and harbor a balance of sorts between them. To embellish, but not too much. To ensure survival, but never overindulge. To be self-aware, but never envious. Instead, Father believed all of these extremes were absolutes, and he dismissed them altogether. Ling and greed. A unity I couldn't see coming even from around the corner. Yet, I should have. Ling and greed, on a basic level, possess the same desire, to be looked upon in reverence, in adoration, in awe. However, Greed's wish was somewhat misplaced. He did not fundamentally understand what he wanted until he witnessed it in both Ling and Ed, his soul brothers. Greed was my favorite homunculus by far. He developed the most human understanding out of them all. Ling and Lanfan. They remind me very much of Roy and Riza, just from Xing instead. One of my favorite moments from earlier in the show was when they faced off against Bradley. It solidified their relationship concretely. It is one of mutual loyalty and respect. Al and May. This is a couple that actually makes a lot of sense to me. They are both younger and play off each other very well in conversation. Al is a very emotionally receptive person, which works given how sensitive May can be. Olivier and Alex. At first, despite how aware I was of how cold Olivier was, I didn't expect her to be that cold to Alex. She really didn't care for him, given the fact that he had ran away from the Ishvalan extermination. Alex is a very soft person, while Olivier is a very hard person. Their ideologies fundamentally clash. However, I was so satisfied to see Alex stand his ground and defend her at all costs against Sloth. Despite everything that was happening at that point in the show, we still got a satisfying amount of time of the two of them together. So I'm very happy with that. And in the end, Olivier did acknowledge her brother after all. The very first theme, or subject of the story, really came full circle by the end. The topic of science versus religion, and how blind belief in either can prevent you from seeing reality for what it is. I found it so interesting to see someone like Ed go from being completely reliant upon alchemy and holding it above everything else, to casting it aside without a second thought. In a sense, he kind of did what Rose did. After she lost everything she was fighting for and was shown her faith was behind a sham, Ed taught her to keep moving forward. This also introduced the show's interest in philosophy. After all, alchemy and philosophy are very intertwined. One of the neatest examples of philosophy to me was when Al encountered Barry the Chopper, two souls inhabiting armored dolls. I recall giving a little explanation on last Thursdayism and how what Barry said is very similar to that. The idea that you can't necessarily prove that everything you've ever known has always existed. It all could have simply popped into existence last Thursday. As well, we have truth and the philosophy that it imposes upon the story on a very fundamental level. Truth, it seems, is a mirror image of ourselves. Truth reflects whoever is speaking to them, in image and in voice. We see this when Ed gives Truth his limbs. As well, this is confirmed when Father talks to Truth at the end of the story. I recall thinking how Truth was a fundamentally cruel god. At first, the fact that it existed to humble human beings who fly too close to the sun made sense. However, when Mustang was forced to the other side, and his vision was taken from him, I wasn't able to agree with that at all. I was glad to see Ed immediately voice that frustration as well. I was beginning to think that Truth was more of a lesser god than the true god of the story. It's still hard to say, to be honest. However, seeing Truth's philosophy better explained to Father at the end, I think I can respect it a bit more. Alchemy has to be one of the coolest power systems to me. I enjoy how basic it is, and how with such simplicity, it can give rise to different styles. We have the Elrics and how they use it, we have Scar and his brother, we have the Armstrongs, we have Shing, Mustang, Kimberly, Hohenheim. Alchemy took on so many different forms, and this series did not shy away from showing it. Xerxes was fascinating to uncover. I was so interested to learn how the original alchemists were actually Hohenheim and Father. This was very satisfying. This story has such a way of laying out all the clues, but without context, they are so difficult to piece together. Lastly, I wanted to end this overview with a more hopeful note. Grumman raised an interesting point at the end of the story. Can humans and homunculi really get along together? I do believe it is possible, especially thanks to greed, pride, and envy. Among the homunculi, these three appeared to be the closest to humans. Greed's dying words were regarding Ed and Ling as his soul brothers. Pride's last thoughts before he thought he was going to die was of his family. Envy, while not as close to the other two, showed an understanding of his place in the world. Heck, even Gluttony, before he died, thought of lust. While I could go on endlessly, a good show does that, I'm going to have to end this review here. This is the very first time I've watched the series and felt the need to condense all of my thoughts in this form. Fullmetal Alchemist is one of the top anime for me. It's too difficult for me to give any anime a specific rating, a number in a top 10 for instance, but it is easily in my top 5. While a lot of anime I've watched influenced me on a more fundamental level, since I watched them when I was much younger, this one anime has been able to reignite that influence. Most I watch today just don't hit me the same as anime did when I was younger, but Fullmetal is definitely unique, and definitely made me feel like my younger self was watching anime again for the first time. I'm going to be giving Fullmetal Alchemist a 9.5 out of 10. Why not give it 10, right? Well, I'm a stickler for perfect scores to represent utter perfection, and 99% of the time, I find there's always room for improvement. The only complaint I would have is, the feeling of the show is a bit difficult to ascertain at first. It feels slightly scattered, but it kind of has to be, given all of the context and setting it's establishing. But the music, the voice actors, the plot, the world, Fullmetal Alchemist doesn't waste a single second of screen time to deliver us on all of it and more. This is why Fullmetal Alchemist is a 9.5 to me. If you like this kind of review series and you'd like to stick around for more, make sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Depending on how much I like each series that I react to, I do plan on putting together a series just like this. As well, look out my top comments. I will be pinning a comment that will explain what my next plan is, what my scheduling will be. I'm not able to do community posts yet, but who knows, maybe in the future I will be. At this rate, man, you never know. I'm already at 130 subs. My goodness, guys, it's only been a week and I've already increased by 20% because of finishing this series, and I just want to let you guys know, like, I appreciate every single one of you. I look forward to reading the comments, and I mean, most of you already know that already, so I'm not going to go on. Go on and on and on. But yeah, thanks for sticking around and watching my videos, and I plan on putting out more at an even better caliber than what I have been doing already. So yeah, thanks for sticking around, guys, and until next time, see ya!